being the end buyers. And so with some computer vision and other, like many other things, obviously, she had a lot of ideas of how to implement that. She's now technical skills to actually do that. She decided we could actually be able to check on each animals while they are out in the open and, just follow their growth, their food intake, every single variable that would be important to know about the animals. And so a farmer could actually ensure the health of the chickens, and the animals will live a better life out in the open. And so in the end, obviously being a higher quality product. And so all of that with AI solutions that are thought by the people and for the people, you can create a lot of amazing things. And it's all about implementing solutions that are able to analyze diverse features in a changing environment and exploit data rather than just looking at it. And we are very proud to do that on a daily basis and to see the improvement they try to bring to society and everyone's life. And so, this is basically the topic of the conference. It's all about AI for the common good. And it's right. I mean, AI should definitely become a tool at the service of people. And it's what everyone is trying to do, and for a good reason. And so it's also why at Le Wagon, we have a duty to train people to exploit data rather than just stopping at studying it or just having a look at it. And we need to train them so they can make something out of it for everyone, like every one of you here. This is what we are striving for. This is what we are very proud to do. And also to do it in an environment that certainly help us accomplish all of that. And it's actually going to be the topic right after the conference of like how you can get citizens more involved around data and AI and the kind of things like having proper models with real use for the citizen that can help with that. And so, we are now merging forces between technology and humans. It's like a new step in society. It's not just about digital transformation, it's about creating smart societies. And we need to get people ready for that. And hopefully you are already, and a lot of other people will be, and we'll be there to train them. So thank you very much.
Now it's my great pleasure to welcome our friend, collaborator, Rob Eman, coordinator at the Knowledge, Data and Society Center at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels, and also an active part of our young life at FARI. So Rob, the floor is yours to help us understand a bit better how to engage citizens and also how to analyze their voices. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I want to thank Carl as well for setting up the greatest panel, I think, of this conference, at least for me. That's a small disclaimer, because if you would have asked me 4 years ago, what would you like to work on? It would be participation in innovation, participation in all kinds of ways, but especially for normative and legal aspects. And if you look at the panel we have today, this is exactly what we are going to talk about. Looking at the previous panels, we also saw this same question arising every time, how we need participation, we need to involve experts, we need to involve data engineers and other engineers. They need to be able to talk to legal and ethical people, but they talk a completely different language. We need people to be AI literate, is what Stefan Verhulst said yesterday. So all these challenges come together, and that brings us to the question, how shall we participate? And that's a tough one. Everyone feels that we need to do this, but in this panel, and only this panel, we'll try to answer how to do this. And I have 3 hows for you. First, we have Alessiu, who will talk about using AI for participation as a solution to, I guess, the many participants, for example, online, and how to actually work with that input. Then we have actually participation for AI development, especially for AI for the common good. That will be Pieter Duisburg. And then we'll close with participation for ethical principles about AI and how to involve citizens in there with Vincent May. So I'm very excited. Let's just get started and listen to Alice Siu, Director of, and I need to make sure I say this right, the Center for Associate Director is what Alice Siu is, and also Professor for the Center for Deliberative Democracy Communication at Stanford University. Alice, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning from California. And also like to let you know that my baby is also awake with me, and she will certainly make an appearance at some point. So thank you so much for the introduction. It's very exciting to know that you all are so deeply in discussion about how AI should be working hand in hand to help us facilitate these deliberations, especially among the public. Today, I'm presenting to you a collaboration that our Center for Deliberative Democracy has with the Crowdsourced Democracy team, both at Stanford. We've been working on our deliberation platform for several years now together, and we created something really wonderful that we've been using around the world in different languages, consulting the public, working with various governments and policymakers to use this platform to do so. And so the platform is AI assisted, and it's AI assisted with no human moderator. So in more traditional deliberations, what we do at our center, deliberative polling, and of course, throughout Europe and the rest of the world, there are different types of deliberation models that are being implemented. And all the methods require a facilitator by and large. So a facilitator will need to guide the group and help the group engage in discussion. But for our center, we've been doing deliberative polling for the last 3 decades. And as being in Silicon Valley, we're always posed with the question, well, what could technology do for us? And when we met up with the Crowdsourced Democracy team, which is housed in the engineering department here on campus, we were posed this question and trying to figure out, well, if we were to include technology into our process, what would it look like? And one of the first things we thought of was really, we would love to engage a whole society to deliberate. And to engage a whole society to deliberate, we need to figure out how to scale deliberation. We couldn't possibly have thousands or tens of thousands of moderators helping with the deliberations. That's just impossible because we've trained moderators for hundreds of people to deliberate together before, but in our experience, unfortunately, humans are humans, and not all deliberation, or not all moderators, rather, are created equal. There are always some that are better than others, and so in order to make the process more consistent and of higher quality, we decided that it was time to figure out how to, my baby agrees, how to have deliberation scaled with AI assisted moderator. And when we say AI assisted, some portion of it is developed through AI, and then the other portion of the platform is really done with the group and allowing them to work together to try to have deliberation work for them. So it's really quite nice to have the platform be AI assisted and then the rest of the platform with participants moving. And so the platform itself features like things like a speaking queue, a timed agenda, and then the platform uses AI to have real-time transcription and tracking of offensive language. The platform also nudges participants to speak when they're not participating or when arguments are not being shared. And so the platform itself is really has some pretty amazing features. And in a minute, I can show you some of what the platform actually does. So just to give you a little background of what deliberative polling actually is, and why we're using some of these features as the foundation for what the platform is built on. Deliberative polling from our center, we've been using it for a few decades now, and the purpose of it is to understand what the people would think if they had time to think about an issue, and that for many of us, just in brief, since this is not the purpose of the conference, but just as in brief, so you understand the platform, is that the claim for most is that the public is not engaged, and not because perhaps they don't want to be, but because there's not enough time in the world to spend on understanding public policy while also working and family and various things. And so what deliberative polling does is we carve out time and we invite people in for a weekend, whether online or face-to-face or multiple weekends, to engage with each other with balanced briefing materials with experts where they can ask questions and get answer and feedback from. And the process is rooted in social science. It has questionnaires, it has qualitative and quantitative component to it. And so the purpose really is to understand what an informed audience, what an informed public would think. And we take all of those key components and we've put them into the platform. And just to see a quick dashboard of all the different events we've had on the platform. We've been in Japan and Hong Kong and Canada. This is up until May, where we had Peru, we had Norway in June, and the this coming month we have Taiwan, and the largest one we had, which I'll talk about, we had over 1,000 people on our platform deliberating at once. So it's quite remarkable to do this. And in Chile, we were actually doing this with the Chilean Senate had commissioned it. So it's quite exciting to be able to do this in so many places. Now, just to share with you before I dive into results and to show you what deliberation online can actually do, here's a clip of what it looks like deliberating on our platform. And we've taken delivery to kind of do snapshots and things like that. So in the following video, I'll show you what the platform actually looks like without editing. So this is a video that we put together as a result of the American One Room event on climate and energy that was done in September of last year. And as this one had over 1,000 people in it, and they deliberated online entirely, during either a weekend or in multiple sessions over weekday evenings. It was extremely exciting. They had a number very significant opinion changes, but I'll let the video do some talking first.
Good morning, I'm Eric.
Hi, I'm Rayanne. I'm from Tennessee.
My name is Ken.
Hi, I'm Carrie.
I'm Barbara.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I live in Southern California.
Hi, I'm Sean. I work in aerospace manufacturing in Washington.
Good morning, I'm Martha Harvey.
Thank you all for joining today. This discussion is an opportunity for everyone to learn. I want to encourage everyone to speak freely. Please respect and listen to each other's opinions and try not to interrupt others.
I do think we need to reduce greenhouse emissions, but I'm not sure how practical it is to totally eliminate a lot of these things.
You guys can hear me, right? Okay, good.
The hollow promise of net zero carbon pledges. And the key message here is, unfortunately, there are no standard guidelines for achieving net zero carbon neutral emissions.
And it feels kind of disingenuous for us to try and regulate other countries when it's still a matter of debate here.
Try to convince me. Maybe I'm a minority of one on this panel, but there really is nothing that human beings can do to tilt climate in one way or the other.
The tax breaks for Tesla owners and those types of policies have come into place because we don't have a lot of low-income people making our laws and policies.
As a libertarian, I hate to agree with you.
Coal is going away naturally on its own. It's so slow. These other things, gasoline-powered cars. So really the issue is not whether it will happen, but how can we speed it up?
Most people are saying that a tax on methane is unnecessary.
I don't have that answer. I'm just throwing that out there.
Most people, most of the time, are not motivated to become informed about complex issues. Furthermore, if they do talk about these issues or consult the media, they consult congenial sources, like-minded people, so they never hear the other side.
They thought, they deliberated, they weighed with one another, and they changed on a great many of these items, not only in statistically significant ways, but in substantively, often very large ways.
So you see these amazing individual examples and anecdotes of people changing their minds, not because a politician is scolding them to do so, but actually the opposite, that they're being empowered to learn about this information for themselves and come up with an emergent opinion that may or may not differ from the party line or dogma.
I joined the project hopefully to learn and to maybe contribute some things. And I did learn. I found out that there were a lot of people who had my concerns.
When we first started, we felt like, oh boy, this is not going to work, because everybody brings their ideas to the table. But we did come to a conclusion that yes, this will work if we work it together.
So I do realize now I only have a couple more, 2 more minutes. All right, 5 minutes, sorry, 5 minutes. So let me try to, oops, okay. I'm gonna sneak in this quick video so you can see actually what the platform looks like. So you can see, this is a very quick video. This is what participants see before, when they're invited to join the event.
We're excited you're thinking about joining our discussions. The deliberation platform is easy to use. Here's what to expect. When you log in, you'll be asked to introduce yourself briefly. The platform will guide you through the discussion topics. You'll get some briefing materials before the session starts, and some of that information is also available in the agenda. After all the topics are discussed, your group will develop and rank some questions to be presented and answered by plenary sessions with experts and policymakers. You'll join that plenary session with your group. Depending on the event schedule, you may join your small group again or complete a survey to finish. We hope you'll join us. See you soon.
Okay, now, so you got a glimpse of what the platform looks like. You see the different aspects of the look and feel of it is very much like a Zoom or a Google Hangout or a Meet. And so we try to keep that. So, and in the last couple of years. People are been so comfortable doing these meetings online, meeting strangers and talking. It's the feel of it is very similar, but the guiding of everything, the meeting and having an agenda, etc., that is definitely different from all the different other platforms that are out there. And that the structured environment for which we've created this platform is what is helping with having consistent deliberation, quality deliberation together, a more civil discussion together. And in the last remaining minutes, I'm going to show you some of the results we have from this climate and energy event, because some people may not think that having those deliberations online would produce necessarily the changes in opinion. So we had in total close to 1,000 participants. We had over 100 small groups. It was extremely representative event in terms of other demographics. I'm going to skip that. So one of the questions we asked was about whether people think that human activity was a part of creating this warming of the Earth's climate. In the US, a lot of things are broken down by party because so many things fall along party line. And so we broke out this here to show, what the changes are before and after deliberation. Overall, 67 to 76%. Among Democrats, it was extremely high. But you see among Republicans, it started at 35% and increased to 54. That is a pretty substantial increase after just some hours of deliberation together. And I only have a minute left, so I'm going to speed through and show you working with like-minded countries to reach net zero. You see the dramatic shifts among Republicans as well, a huge shift amongst the group overall. Getting rid of coal, 29 to 53% among Republicans. And you can see more and more, the changes that are different between independents and Republicans. This one among pharmaceuticals, pretty high amongst everyone, highest increase among Republicans as well. The one about EVs, electric vehicles, and whether they should, there should be elimination of sale of new gas and diesel cars. Very, very much an opposition for Republicans, opposite for Democrats. But in terms of providing financial incentives, most everyone, about half of Republicans, are in support of this. But you can see that the deliberation here over just hours together produced a lot of these changes. And so it's fascinating to do so. This is only just kind of the start of what we're talking about. We see efficacy changes, knowledge gains, the evaluations for the event were extremely high, very much comparable to our face-to-face events. And the changes of opinion are very comparable to our face-to-face events as well. But more so, whether opinion changes happens is one thing, but in the discussions, we see more empathy being built, the ability to listen to each other. And my time is up, so I have to stop talking, but there's a Q&A later, so I'd be happy to answer questions from all of you. And I'm really excited that I get to share the platform with you and what we're doing to engage and have a more potentially deliberative society at some point using this technology. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alice, also for joining us really early for your local time. We checked 5:30 in the morning. So I have two questions for you. Who was your cute little, what was the name of your cute little co-presenter? And then as a second, more serious question, but equally important, how are you dealing with inclusion and diversity in your online panel? Because I can imagine it's quite difficult. We all had our share in experiencing technical difficulties in online meetings the past 2 years.
Yeah, so my baby daughter, his name is Karis. She's 6 months old, but she's been whisked away like other famous movie stars. To answer your question, it's a great question with respect to inclusion. So with all of deliberative polls that we do, it does include representative samples. So to start out with, we worked with the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago to recruit our sample of this particular sample of the US. And there are a number of things that we do to try to have all sectors of society included. One of which is having monetary compensation. Not all methods, subscribe to this, but we certainly do. And just to share with you, for this particular event, to get a cross section of the US, each participant was paid $300 US in cash for participating. The event was online. And so we made all sorts of accommodations. If people needed new equipment, we sent that. If people needed boosting of internet, we did that. If people needed childcare, needed dependent care, we also provided a stipend for food while the event was happening, so people didn't have to worry about cooking or cooking for other people in their household. And so we provided all sorts of support, whether in funding or equipment, to ensure that anyone who was invited and drawn into the sample so that our sample could be representative had the ability to do so. And this goes for any event that we do, any deliberative poll that we do. Monetary compensation and support in any way is always something we do. And that's our way of trying to have a more inclusive population. And that way tends to work very well. And because it captures people who need to get off work to come to an event like this. And it captures people that are really not interested in the event, rather interested in all the other perks that happen to be given at the event. And then it captures people that obviously are interested in the topic as well. But we find that it has worked pretty well in doing so. And we know this because we can compare the demographics against the general population, and not only demographics, but the attitudes of participants as well, to see how they compare to the general population.
Okay, thank you, Alice. So takeaway message here is, if you want to do participation, try to be as inclusive as Alice by making sure that these people have nothing else to do but follow and participate online. I think this is a great example of inclusion. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Pieter Duisburg, co-coordinator of the Knowledge Center Data and Society.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter, also part of the Knowledge Center Data and Society indeed. I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the AMAI project, which is a public outreach project on AI. And I will also go into detail a bit more about one specific method we used, data walks. So AMAI, it's not a fancy acronym. It's basically a saying that a lot of people in Flanders and maybe also the south of the Netherlands use quite often when they're surprised, when they're amazed. And it's actually, I think, quite a good title for this project, because it's, of course, it has these letters AI in it, as you have spotted yourself, I'm sure. But also the goal of the project was also to make clear that it is something, AI is something that is very common, and something that might, indeed, citizens might be surprised of in good and in bad ways. So I will come to the data walks later, but first a little bit more about this AMAI project. It is the public outreach project, a program of the AI Flanders program, and it's a large-scale citizen science project that tries to inform citizens, but also involve them in AI innovation. And it's doing that by showing them how AI is already part of their lives, but also hearing them hearing their ideas. Okay, now that you know a little bit maybe about AI, how would you want to improve your life? And how would you want it to contribute to things that you find important? And also we want to show them in the project how those ideas can become a reality. So AI outreach, we're certainly not the only party trying to do this. But in my opinion, it's often done in this way. It's often still aimed at tech enthusiasts. Still you see these images being used, like this one, these kind of robotic faces. Maybe the crowd in this room is I don't know, is interested in these images, but I think the population at large tends to avoid these type of approaches and images, and we try to find another way. For our audience in this project, we try not to focus on the technology as a starting point, but we try to focus on the purpose, on the use case as a starting point to involve them in AI in general. And we do this by focusing on the change people would like to see. And starting from there, we try to look at, okay, this is important for you. Now, maybe AI can play a role here. Let's see what it can do. And the target audience for this research, for this project, is better to say, has been defined as maatschappelijke toepassers, and I'm not sure how to translate it, but basically it comes down to that part of society that has limited or no trust in technology and is not very motivated to, learn more about it by themselves. But who might be convinced to learn more about it if they can see very concrete, very tangible societal value for this. And in our research, in our pre-study, almost half of the population, roughly speaking, would fall under this, would be part of this target audience. And when I say we, I'm actually talking of the two organizations who are running this project. So I'm part of the Knowledge Center Data and Society, that focuses on all things legal, ethical in AI. And the other partner involved is Civil, which is the Flemish Knowledge Center for Citizen Science. And this project has been funded by the Flemish government. And if you haven't seen it yet, we have a booth by the Knowledge Center here in the reception hall. And I feel bad for using this picture because we are actually a whole team. Actually took a better picture yesterday that I will include in future presentations. So talk to us during the breaks if you want to know more about how we go about and maybe want to learn more about these AI blind spots that we have developed that point out certain pitfalls that you might encounter when you take up an AI project. But with regards to the AMAI project, you could say that we have three goals that we formulated. One was to create more insight with citizens, give them some insight on AI. So it is a public awareness. It wants to create awareness. It is a science communication project. But we also want to involve them. So it is a citizen science project, and we want to create impact. So there's also a project called Connected to a part of this project. And insight that we created, actually we did this in many ways, and this could be a whole presentation by itself, the different activities that we did and how we tried to reach out, because it is quite challenging. And we try to always map our approach to the people that we try to reach. For instance, we try to reach out to a lot of civil society organizations and that are working on the topics that we decided to focus on in the AMAI project. I have not included this on a slide, but we are focusing on 4 topics, which are mobility, health, climate, and environment and work. We chose those 4 because we think these are 4 topics that a lot of people care about or want to think about, are worried about maybe. And starting from there, we reached out to those organizations that focus on that, explained them a little bit about my project, and for instance, did a brainstorm session with them, starting from their working points, from the things that they identified as these are items that we should be working on as an organization in the nearby future. But there are many other things that we also did to create more insight. For instance, data walks, which I will talk about later. We had a collaboration with the public broadcaster, actually the Radio 2, which is the biggest radio broadcaster in Flanders. and bringing down the conversation to a level that is understandable for the 600,000 people that they reach in the evening. So you have to switch a lot the type of message that you bring. You have to bring it down to the level of a broad audience. And I have to say that it's quite challenging because often you think this is understandable for everyone, and then they say we don't get it at all. So it was very good to collaborate with, for instance, them to make sure that you're talking on the right level. And of course, we want to involve them, the citizens as well. That was the next phase. And after providing insight in AI, we always switch the conversation. Now you know a little bit more. Tell us what you want to do. And this was only one way of involving citizens in the whole AMAI project. So that was the first step, basically. But also in the project call and in the realization of the projects, which I will talk about in the next slides, there was also always this link with citizens. For instance, when the projects, when the decision had to be made, which projects are we going to fund? Of course, first we had this expert jury, but then the next step, we kept the 3 best projects per topic, per domain, and then we presented these to the broad audience, and we invited the audience at large, like, okay, which topics do you think are most important? Which one should be realized? So we give them a voice in that stage as well, and also in the realization of the projects. These are citizen science projects, so citizens get a role in these projects, for instance, by collecting data, annotating data, by taking part in co-creation sessions. So we try to involve citizens in all stages of this trajectory. And we actually are doing this for the second time now. And the first phase of the project has just ended. This is the phase where we provide insight and collect these ideas. We have over 500 ideas now from citizens on how they want AI to be used for things they find important. And for those, I was too lazy to translate this, I'm sorry. But if you look at the ideas, you can see some of them are pretty wild. And I think if you would be working in AI innovation, you might think, okay, these are crazy ideas maybe. But still, from a public outreach perspective, I think it's already a huge step to convince someone who has just learned a little bit about AI to, okay, try to think, how would you want to use it? This is, in my eyes, already a big achievement if you're doing public outreach. So this type of involvement, we found it very important, but also challenging to stimulate people to dare to share their ideas. And of course, then the next step, we wanted to create impact, and this is the project call that was actually launched just a few days ago for the second time, where we present these ideas clustered in big categories and invite consortia that can consist out of companies, local governments, nonprofit organizations to work on some of the one or many or several ideas that citizens have shared. So I'm going to go over the details. These are the projects that were approved from last year. And for instance, one project looks at the state of bike lanes. Another one wants to create a tree map. And these were qualitative projects, but I think it's important here to say that in the jury, we don't only include AI experts, but we also include citizen science experts, experts on science communication, because we don't only want to look at these projects from a perspective of how qualitative are these projects. Of course, this is an important element in it, but also we want to use them as a form of science communication. We talk about them again on the public broadcaster, we present them on media outlets. So they, again, are used to create awareness. And that's why they have a certain immediacy. They are easy to understand what the added value might be. And this was one element that we used to decide which project gets funded here. So just 2 minutes about these data walks or AI walks that I mentioned before. So this is one of the ways in which we wanted to create insight in AI. And a data walk, in short, is a kind of guided walk that focuses on the use of data and AI in a public space in a smart city. And you see here a picture that was taken in Ghent, where we are discussing this little sign, you might see it, at the center, actually, where it's indicated like you are entering a zone that is protected by cameras. So it's a walk very. I mean, it's very accessible because it's aimed at a broad audience and it's just an easy walk in the city. But meanwhile, you're introduced to all types of concepts, personal data gathering that is happening while you are walking around in the city, and you learn about how this data is being used, is being processed also by AI applications. And these data walks, you can use them in several ways. You can use them to raise awareness, but also to encourage critical reflection. We mainly use them to stimulate co-creation. After the walk, we had a kind of brainstorm session. And we had these sessions in Leuven, Ghent, Mechelen, Brussels as well. The term was actually first coined by Dr. Alison Powell, but some colleagues of mine at the research center IMEC Smith VUB further worked on it, and they first presented it as a tool to also do a data protection impact assessment to include these views from data subjects in your impact assessment. And this is, of course, one way how you can use it, but in my project, we also use it to stimulate creativity. If you're curious to learn more about this specific method, I will refer to the Spectre project, where this was actually developed, or the policy brief that you can find on the website that details, that gives you further details on the method. And of course, if you want to know more about the project call that was just launched, I will refer to that on my website. So yeah, that was my talk. I hope it was interesting for you.
Peter, the question we have for you is, well, I first have to explain a little bit. You were given the Mission Impossible. I remember co-writing the proposal and thinking, how can we make this project a bit more ambitious than the other projects where we try to do science communication about AI? You have the elements of AI MOOC, everyone knows, but only people who are interested in AI follow this. So I thought, let's make a Mission Impossible and let Peter invite people who are not interested in AI and do citizen science with them. So my question for you was, what were the challenges in getting people activated or even participating in the first place?
Yes, that was a challenge, and it's actually still a challenge. I won't say we have solved the problem. Or the challenge, maybe it's not a problem. But yeah, it is very hard because even yesterday, I think I heard this expression, AI is the new electricity. But if you go to a person on the street and you say, AI is the new electricity, do you want to learn more? The chance is pretty big that they will say, already have electricity, my life is okay. So it's often very challenging to find this way in other people's lives. For most people, it's actually something that's very far from their daily life, as we might know, but still it is then still hard to find that connection. And for instance, what we try to do, we had all these methods to create more insight, but still we try to tailor these methods on the specific occasions and organizations we were into contact with. Because even if you find this way to bring across a certain message or to bring across certain knowledge, the next step where we wanted to get their ideas for AI was still very threatening often, like, oh, I don't know, I'm still clueless. And to then just have a simple conversation to talk about their lives. Okay, what are you working on? What is happening in your life? What is going on? And start from that conversation to see, okay, well, the thing you mentioned here, actually, this is something that AI could play a role in. So it is this almost extreme tailoring of your message that works, but also, of course, also it's very labor intensive, I would say, but I think it's the best way.
Thank you, Peter. Then, yes. So the second how we remember is tailor until they understand that it's about them and not about AI anymore. I first have a question for the audience. Who in this room has read the ethical AI principles from UNESCO, a draft or the finished version? Raise your hands. Okay, I think that's still quite a lot. The next speaker, Vincent May, is going to talk about these ethical guidelines and how to get citizens participating and talking about those, which I think is another mission impossible.
Thank you very much. So hi, I'm Vincent May. I'm a PhD candidate in MILA, the Quebec Institute of Artificial Intelligence, and I'm actually working day-to-day on deep reinforcement learning. But I'm also a researcher at the Algora Lab, which is a laboratory on AI ethics and deliberation, especially on AI ethics. So, great, it works. So, as we, the reason why we are here today and yesterday too, is that we know that AI is a powerful and disruptive technology that will impact the life of citizens. And so it's important that these changes are made accordingly to the values of our societies, and as such, that we give a voice to the citizens. And so I'm going to present one methodology. I think we already talked about it with the presentation a bit before. It's called deliberation. And I think it's a very interesting tool to give a voice to citizens, but especially when you try to include them in the process of creating normative documents on AI ethics. And so that's a bit what I'm going to discuss today. But first, I want to explain a bit what is a deliberation. So we already talked a bit once again earlier, but the idea is to invite participants to think together about the problem, and then to formulate rational arguments to support their positions. And then concretely, we actually bring them around the table, or when it's online in a Zoom meeting. And then there's also a trained facilitator who's there. And during 2 to 4 hours, or even longer, it can be, they work as a group to answer different questions. It's great if we can reach a consensus. It is not necessary. It's also okay to disagree. And as such, deliberation actually, great. It builds up on collective intelligence, right? We get people together, and we allow emergence of minority but relevant point of views. That's really important because it's like point of views that we might not have actually been able to hear otherwise. And another thing that's actually quite good with deliberation, I think I'm going too fast. Anyway, is that it also allows people to evolve in their opinions, because you share experience of the others, you listen to the others, and then you actually evolve in your opinions and in your point of view. So as such, it's actually a great tool in the process of creation of normative instruments, because it creates very rich content. So it's not only about getting people to discuss, but also we can get content from that. And this content can be very complementary to the work of experts. And it also gives some legitimacy to normative instruments. As Stefan Verhul said yesterday, there's a need for a social license when we create these instruments. And so this can be a step towards that. And in addition, as was said also, it's also great because it improves their awareness. It gets people actually involved in the topic. Once they actually have discussed and made their voice heard, they actually want to know what's happening afterwards. And so they listen to the news a bit more and actually are more interested into that. So today I want to describe 2 cases of deliberation that we have worked on, where the process was used to support normative tools on the ethics on AI particularly. The first one is the Montreal Declaration for Responsible Development of AI. We went through a co-construction process on that. And the second one is the international consultation for the UNESCO recommendation that we talked about also yesterday. So, does it work? That was the wrong one. Okay, so the Montreal Declaration. This is a project that was organized by the University of Montreal. I'm a PhD student, so I'm going to name all the people who actually collaborated or led the team. It was Marc-Antoine Dillac, Christophe Abrassard, and Nathalie Voreno in particular, with a way bigger team. The objective was the co-construction of a declaration which underlines the ethical principles which should be followed when developing artificial intelligence. It was in 2018. It was a time when a lot of people were actually trying to develop these principles. Now I know we're a bit past that, but at the time it was really something that needed to be done. And so what we did is that we actually invited citizens in common areas, such as libraries or community rooms, as you can see here. And we went through a process. The process was the following. First, we introduced them to AI and AI ethics, right? It's important that everybody is kind of the same minimal background. And then we split them in thematic groups. The groups were 5 to 10 people, as I said, for deliberation with a trained facilitator. And there were different sectors: education, healthcare, city, justice. For each group, we gave a 4-side scenario to spark the debate. So what is the 4-side scenario is very important. It's something it's kind of the seed to the discussion. It's a short story that is set maybe in 5 to 10 years which illustrates in a given sector how ethical controversies on AI could surface or grow in the next few years. Obviously, it's always a bit further, it's prospective, so it's a bit more intense than actually what will actually happen. But the idea is to try to get these discussions to come. So once they were given the scenario, the group was asked to frame the ethical and social issues and explore how an ethical controversies could grow, and then ask to propose recommendations, such as rules, policies, research, etc. So overall, we consulted around 250 participants, including citizens, but also sector experts, people who are not experts in AI, but are experts in, like in justice, in education, in health, professionals, industry stakeholders, public officials. There was also AI specialists. So we tried to get like a good picture of people working on that. And then this results in a declaration of 10 principles. So these are the 10 principles. I don't need to go really into them. But what's quite interesting afterwards is that this was signed by, 2,000 citizens. More interestingly, I think, is 200 organizations. These ones include companies, organisms, institutions, governments, such as the City of Montreal, universities and research centers, which is also quite important, the University of Montreal, Waterloo, McGill, among others. And I think that one of the reasons why we have the success of getting people adopt this declaration is because of the legitimacy that comes from consulting citizens. Okay, so that was the Montreal Declaration. I want to talk about another project, the one under UNESCO. So this one was in 2020. It was organized by Algora Lab with a lot of partners, also led by Marc-Antoine Dillac, together with Pauline Loiseau and our beloved Carl. So in 2019, actually, the UNESCO decided to start the project of building a recommendation on AI ethics, right? We talk about it we saw it actually in the very first presentation of the conference. The idea is not to be legally binding, but to formulate principles and norms that then will be adopted by the signatory countries. So the process to build this recommendation was the following. First, there was an ad hoc expert group that was named, so they were experts in AI ethics, and they built a draft version. And then the UNESCO partnered with Algora Lab and Mila, among others, to consult with stakeholders and citizens from across the world, the whole world, to collect feedback and insights from the public on their draft. The initiative was called the Open Dialogue on AI Ethics. And just to know, also there was other consultation processes that was also done in parallel, but I'm going to focus on the one I know the most. So the objective was to get deliberations on the draft of this document, right? So there's two challenges there that came up. The first one is, we want people to think not only about the issues, but also about the text, a text of law. And it's not very accessible to everyone to read the full draft of the recommendation. And the second challenge is that we want to reach as many people as possible from as many countries as possible and be as inclusive as possible. And another challenge that happened, I don't know if you noticed the date, but when we started, it was before the pandemics. And then as soon as we launched the project with, we're supposed to travel a bit everywhere and organize these deliberations in person. And then suddenly, pandemics, and then we had to do everything online, which actually was maybe actually for the best. It was actually easier to organize and to make it on a larger scale. So what did we do? We got local facilitators. That's what the first step. We tried to figure out, obviously we could not reach out for ourselves to people everywhere in the world. So we decided to decentralize the process. We used academic, professional, diplomatic, personal networks to try to invite and identify potential local facilitators. And these people, we trained them and we gave them the responsibility to recruit the participants. That was really a way to get people that were, I don't have a lot of time left. Okay, so I'll be quick. So once we got these facilitators, we gave them a guide that we developed, a guide for the facilitators, a guide for the participants, and we gave them scenarios, a bit as before. And with these scenarios, a list of pre-selected articles that were relevant to the scenario from the text, the draft version. And then we asked people, well, to identify the ethical issues, once again, just to warm them up, but more interestingly, to evaluate the recommendations articles on different criteria. We had special sessions for women, for indigenous people, for teenagers, because these are people that usually are less heard. And as a result, so here are some photos of the things happening in Brazil, in Benin, and in Canada. And as a result, we conducted 48 deliberative sessions in 17 countries from regions all around the globe. And we reached overall 611 participants from 54 countries, many done online. As the results, well, very, very high level results, there was a main agreement with the values and the elements of the recommendation, but there was demand for stronger terms, more specific terminology, and also to add some elements that had not been identified by the experts. And so that was really interesting. And then when we sent the report to the expert group, they drew on this feedback and actually presented the second version that actually had implemented most of the changes we asked. For example, the need in healthcare to consider the relationship between the patient and the healthcare worker when developing an AI, addition of the condemnation of the use of AI for political manipulations, and on and on. In the end, there was like 2 more versions afterwards because there were comments from countries and everything, and it was adopted in November 2021. So I'm going to go very, very quick on lessons and challenges. We have made other consultations also, and so I want to draw really quickly on the lessons we have. First, AI is a complex topic, but it's actually quite easy to vulgarize when you actually go to the level of trying to have fruitful discussions on societal and ethical impacts, right? The challenge is not, to discuss the next deep learning architecture, but to arbitrate the new trade-offs that this technology is bringing. And for that, the experts, actually the people who make the society. The second thing is that we actually figure out that people are actually quite motivated to participate in these things when the output is clear, such as you're going to participate to make a declaration of principles that going to be that can be adopted by companies or governments. You're going to participate to work on the UNESCO text, right? When we try to get people to recruit people for more general consultations, it was harder to get them because they give their time, they give their work. It's important that it actually reaches something. The third lesson is the importance of facilitators, right? We need the facilitators. They're the ones who make sure that the discussion goes well, that everybody is heard, and on and on. But it's also, especially in international consultations, it's also important because they're the people who understand the culture, who understand the codes, and who are actually able to correctly manage this and understand what's actually been said during these discussions. So it's really important to have people, facilitators, that are actually integrated in the society in which they actually facilitate. 2 challenges. The first one is that, as you have understood, the scenarios are the seed for the discussions, and we have to be extremely careful of creating relevant yet balanced scenarios, which do not completely influence the results. And the second one is that diversity is critical. It's also very hard to achieve. It requires accessibility for all. It requires deliberate efforts to reach out to underrepresented communities. We were very happy actually to manage to get parity on gender distribution because we did these workshops, especially for women or for indigenous people. But even then we had some problems. For example, this was for UNESCO, and we can see that 73% of the participants who answered the poll, but still, had a university training, and 22% more had a professional training, and this is absolutely not representative of the population, of the world population, and this is very, very hard challenges that we don't have complete answers to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent, for this very interesting presentation. My question to you was, how did you go about balancing these scenarios?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think it's actually a critical question because, as I said, these scenarios are actually the seed of the discussion. And what you don't want when you are actually the experts who write these scenarios is to influence too much the results of the discussion in advance. Otherwise, you lose the whole value of the deliberation. And I think it really depends on the objective of the deliberation. So, for example, in the Montreal Declaration, what we wanted is to identify the principles. So so what we did is we wrote scenarios that were very general about a particular sector. So we aimed it on the sector. Then we put different places where AI will pop up and could create some issues. And then we asked, the goal was to get people imagine this kind of world, and based on their experience and based on their personal experience and on the projection they're making, to identify some issues that could happen. So we did not want to like underline the issues. On the other hand, for the UNESCO recommendation, the goal was not anymore to identify issues. This had been done already. The goal was to criticize or get feedback on this draft presentation. And so there it was fine to actually underline a bit more in broad, like in a bit stronger terms, some issues. And then we will put the article, and then people will then decide if that made sense or not. So it really depends. And every time it's a big work of design, conception, to make sure that we strike the right balance.
Thank you very much, Vincent May. This is all about participation. So my first question is, can the experts, or rather presenters, come to the front and take a seat? I made it a bit more cozy because it's just the three of us. It's all about participation, so I think, or propose, we should start with a question from the audience. If there are questions, that is. There's a question over there.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Nilu. My work is where interaction design, ethics, and social data science meet. First of all, thanks to everybody for the inspiring talks. I had two questions, one from Alice and one from Peter. So my first question from Alice was that, did you do any participant experience studies on the platform? Like, how did the participants find the experience of being part of such a large group of people in the conversation? Did they find it overwhelming? Did they find it easy to follow? How did it work for them, basically? And my question from Peter is that you did mention that you put out calls for civil movements to also join you guys and get some help. I wanted to ask you if any civil movements responded to the call, and if so, how was it like working with them? Thank you.
Okay, ladies first, Alice.
Sure. So yes, we always ask participant experience questions at the end of the process. For this event online and for and as comparable to other ones we've done in person and online, participants enjoy the process very much. We ask specifically about the overall experience and then ask about their small group discussion, their plenary session, the materials we offer them, and we ask them about the platform itself, whether they felt that the platform was not only if it was easy to use, but also if it guided them properly through the different aspects of the discussion, where all the arguments were presented. So we were quite detailed about the entire experience, and across all of them, the marks were very high, close to 90%, if not above, for some questions in terms of whether they valued the experience and whether they agreed with statements about their experience. And I think most of all, people really were grateful for the experience to engage with others like themselves about these key issues, and being able to just talk to other people with strangers about some of these policies, and learn about each other's stories and their lives. And so it was a very positive experience for everybody, at least so we've heard. So we haven't had anybody complain about their experience yet.
Thank you very much, Alice. And maybe a mini follow-up question. Did you also follow the participatory behavior of the participants? Like if certain groups were drawn into some sort of spiral of silence, or some groups were participating more and more by time,
Yeah, so the one beauty of our platform is that it was built, at least as we're academics and researchers, We're always concerned about getting data from the platform. And so when we built the platform, I made the request to design it as research heaven. So we record any and all web interactions from the platform. And so we know everything from the platform and anything that happens. Because of that, we know exactly what people say. We have all the recordings and all whether people get nudged to talk and whether they talk then. And so there's so much for us to learn in the platform and the interactions that are there. We find that in all the different small groups, we do random assignment. So there's no predetermined spot where someone would go. But across all the groups, we see opinion change. That doesn't change one way or another based on group composition. It's really about the discussion that's being had. I could talk for so much longer about the group dynamics and various things, but in short, because of random assignment, we can see the different types of groups and whether changes happen for one way or another. So far, we haven't seen any trends yet, at least for this particular event, but we're continuing to analyze that, and we'll certainly make any of the results publicly available.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Peter.
I'm trying to remember your question. It was about the civil movements.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll tell you how we went about. So I think we made a long list of all the civil movements that were active on the 4 domains that we were focusing on. So these were climate and environment, mobility, health, and work. I think we ended up with a list of about over 200 organizations that we then contacted, presenting our project, presenting our offering, inviting them for an online information session. This was in the middle of the pandemic just last year, so this was our only option back then. And I think about 1 in 4 reacted to our message, which I thought was not too bad, because of course these people get all these type of messages all the time. And I have to say, I was quite surprised with the input because I thought there would actually be even more reluctancy with these groups, but of course they had heard of artificial intelligence. They did not really know what to do with it, but at least, they could they could make half an hour of free time in their agenda to attend these information sessions. It was very low threshold. And in these sessions online, we of course talked about the program, but we already immediately did like this small online brainstorm session on AI. So it was already, we kind of tricked him in a small learning moment immediately, which worked quite well, I have to say. And it, as a follow-up, we were able to do in several organizations like smaller brainstorms with their members or their volunteers, or depending on the type of organization, because this variety was huge. And the fact that we, there again, as kind of facilitators, came to them, tailored our approach to how they were working and tried to fit in as best as we could, really worked. So I think that was one way to get them on board. But of course, also the fact that you connect a project call to this type of awareness raising for them was really important, because often these organizations, of course, are always looking for funding. And the fact that you provided this funding opportunity in relation to this learning moment also helped to get them on board, I think.
Very interesting, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Raise your hand if you have them. I'm looking like this because otherwise I don't see you. Yes, there's a question there.
Hello, beautiful. Thank you very much for your time. I'm really, really grateful. It's my first time actually participating in a conference like this, and I can call myself a newbie in all of this. And I have some questions because like I got some interest in the NFT space. I'm myself an NFT trader, so I'm involved in this Web3 space. And I heard that there are IA over there where people put like trades and use like robots to earn money. So I want to ask a question if you have any knowledge about this topic, how IA can be implemented in the Web3 space. Thank you.
Thank you for your rather technical question. I think we could crowdsource it, so I'll first ask our experts and otherwise the audience. Is any of you three feeling comfortable answering this question because you are participation experts in the first place and AI experts in a secondary degree without being disrespectful? So we'll have to crowdsource this question after this session. I think it's a great question and we could include it in the MI platform if we do a next iteration. But I think it's a bit too technical for now. So I had a question to the panelists themselves. What did you learn from the other participatory approaches you heard here? Because there aren't that many people experimenting with online participation where AI is a facilitator or co-moderator, or where you want to get people interested in AI or ethical principles, while a lot of people don't even know what these things are in the first place. So what did you learn, Peter, from the other two?
I'm especially thinking of your presentation, Vincent. I really like this little seed that you were using, these storylines to bring across these, because when we talk about even the word ethics, it's such a heavy word. I'm still looking for a way to present it to people in a less I don't know, lower threshold, like an easier way to talk about it. And it's always, I'm still searching for it. And I think I actually want to learn more about these little comics that you were using, because I do think indeed that these dilemmas, which seem very abstract and high level, are actually can be made very tangible and concrete and are actually part of our everyday lives. So I think by bringing them or presenting them in that way, you can make everyone discuss them. So I'm actually, because we are also thinking about now the first edition of the MI project was really focused on let's make AI solutions ourselves, but we noticed when we invited people to share their ideas that they also share concerns very often. Like, yeah, I do like this idea of a camera that creates this tree map, but what does this mean for my privacy when a drone is hovering over my house, for instance? So you feel that the people do want to talk. When you bring this topic to a broader audience, people want to discuss this as well. And we made this part of the second project to also capture ideas from citizens in that regard. And we're still struggling to, okay, how can we create a tool out of this that is useful for local governments or industries to include those concerns when they are working on AI projects. But this method could be inspiring for us as well to discuss these challenges further with citizens as well. So that's one thing I'm keeping in mind.
Thank you, Peter. I'll let Alice go first, and then I'll turn to you, Vincent.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think in this space, one question that I always get asked when I share about this platform that we have, and I'll pose this to our co-panelists here, is what are some of the concerns that people raise to you when you talk about your projects, about with having AI involved in public participation or deliberation? And are we worried that we're eliminating some aspect of human interaction, or is this really the right space for citizen participation? because some of the feedback that I get, at least, is not only should AI not be involved, that we should be doing things online when it comes to citizen participation. We should really be doing things face to face where we have more impact, and that's where the money should go, because each dollar goes further than having this done online. And so that's a question that I get often when we talk about not only incorporating technology within deliberation and participation, but really just the overall philosophy of how we should be operating here in this space. And I wonder what the two of you think as well.
I mean, I was actually having a question for you on that particular prospect, because so as I said, I think for us the facilitators were actually having a very important role in the whole process, and in your platform that actually, what I've understood, there's no facilitator. And for us, there's obviously the question of facilitating the discussion, making sure everything works as like with the process. But there's also this idea of understanding really what's happening and making sure that it's depending on the cultural background and like everything goes according to the codes of the culture that actually are there. And there's finally a part where the facilitators are the one who report on what happened afterwards. And so when we use deliberations, at least as a way to create content for analysis afterwards, the facilitators also have a very critical role. And so I'm wondering, in your case, how do you actually, well, first of all, deal with the different cultures and different codes, but also, is there someone who watches everything all the time and then create and take notes, or how do you actually report on what's happening?
Should I go ahead and answer that first?
Yes, go ahead, Alice. Thank you.
No, it's a great question. So yes, it's AI assisted, which means there's still a lot of humans involved in the process, in the back end when things happen. So as groups are happening on their own, there is we have always on staff for every project, 2 or 5 people that are watching the groups, observing the groups as well, and then on top of that, we have collaborators that are also observing the groups for what the participants are saying, et cetera. So there is a lot of human activity that is happening behind the scenes. And we can intervene if we see that something is not going well, or there are personal attacks or things like that happening. But in the thousands of groups that we've ran so far, we haven't come across any instance where intervention was really necessary. There was one instance where one group was very heated in discussion, and we had to jump in very briefly just to remind people of the guidelines. But in all the other cases, things were happening as they were planned, and it's surprising actually to see that the structure itself has really been able to maintain that civil discussion that's necessary for us, at least, and really due to the way that we've structured the platform and the deliberation itself, that it's really lends itself to that. But I agree, there's always that need to have feedback. We always have a help button in case people want to ask a real human question and to get feedback, at least on the platform.
Okay, thank you. Peter, did you experience this? Should we be doing this in the first place, having a deliberation about AI in your project?
What is the question exactly? Do you mean?
In Alice's case, the question was, should we do participatory discussions online? Shouldn't we be doing these things offline, or spend our money on something else? Did you have this question as well? Should we be doing this in the first place, and how did you deal with it?
I need to think about this. I think in my case, when people question what you do, basically, because that's what this is referring to. Is this necessary that we think about this? I think often you get citizens themselves saying, I don't know, I don't know why I need to be involved. I don't know why I should contribute to this discussion or why I should be sharing my ideas. I think it's important to do it and to strive to hear their voices, because of course I think all of us in this room are convinced that it has a huge impact on everyone's life and artificial intelligence, but many people still see it as something that they should not be involved with. So I think that is one thing that we try to convince them of, like, yes, you should actually try to think about this. So this is one part of the work, or the biggest part of the work, I think. I think also because it's this huge evolution that even from maybe this is a bit a huge argument, but if you say, like, from a democratic perspective, governments are allocating big funding to these AI programs, and I think you should explain to people why this is happening as well. And I think this is also part of the mission that we're doing, to, like, this is happening because it can create value in this many ways, and that's why you need to be involved in some way as well. I'm not sure if that is a answer to your question, but that is my answer nevertheless.
Yeah, I'm not that strict as Mireille Hildebrand, so to me that's certainly an answer to the question and also the conclusion for this panel. I want to thank Alice Siu, Vincent May, and Peter Duisburg. Again, they will be, Peter and Vincent will be around, Alice will be around online, where she organizes these online deliberative sessions. If you have questions, I invite you to ask them during the break as well. These experts on participation are here, and you're all experts to a certain extent on AI. So if you want to envision further projects where we can foster participation and debate, these are the people you need to talk to. And I thank you all again for being here. Thank you.
The Royal Chocolate Factory. Wow. I know that you don't like chocolate. This person has a problem with chocolate. So he's a you made an exception for Belgium. Royal Belgium. His wife is from Ecuador, and so yeah.
Wow, we have high standards.
I could not ask my question.
Sorry.
No problem. That's great. So I will answer our question. Okay. And then, Vincent, I need your slide also, if you can.
For sure, I can send you.
Great.
You're ready.
And then, I had a question, I had a question about that how do you face that, or how do you integrate them and the idea of proportion of the population that is really against that, or my brother.
Your brother?
Yeah, my brother. You know,
and so interesting family.
What are you doing? And how do you take that?
I think the team they included it in their statistics. I don't know the number by heart. That's a more recent one, and it was smaller than I was actually expecting. So most people in their results were at least curious, or maybe not curious, but like even different to it. But how to deal with them? Because they often have this image like it's incontrollable, you can not do anything about it. I often talk about regulation, because it's not the Wild West. There is regulation.
I would send him to the AMI website and the example for AI in supermarkets. Like Steve developed a story like you go to the supermarket, you're actually interacting with AI on a daily
the way
basis.
I do, huh? It's
then
a really
okay,
tailored discussion.
Then it's okay.
But so first, it happens a lot actually during the deliberations that we had at least one or two people at the table who say like, yeah, that's bad because AI is bad. And then, but actually, I think the great thing about deliberation is that you can, if you say that, then for 2 hours you're sitting and you're not talking. And so because you already made your point. And so people actually, okay, someone says, yeah, but what about that? Like, okay, yeah, maybe. And then you force people to have nuanced point of views. And it actually, usually people are like, they still produce interesting content. And it's very important to listen to them because they actually have important things to say. And they say important things also.
I discuss much with the unions, for example. In France, I did the first deliberation in 2017. And I went to the CIS also, the European Council.
way. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it, despite rejection and the worst odds.
So you have a screen here and you have your clicker here. And you already have your slides with us?
Yes. Okay, so I pass with this.
You can, yeah, and this one you have to direct it to the projection. I'll be somewhere here showing you the main time.
If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind. Your mind.
to lift my heart. Feel yesterday, feel my love. Always, always.
So good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Time flies when you're having fun, so it's already the last session of the whole of the conference. And I'm very pleased to announce the panel leader of the last session, which is one of our FARI core research leaders. It's Professor Gianluca Bontempi. He's co-directing the machine learning group of the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and also taking part in a lot of other initiatives related to AI and AI for the common good. For example, also was leading during the COVID-19 pandemic, the working group on AI for COVID-19 in the CLARE network, for example, but among many other things. Gianluca, please.
So good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Carl-Heinz, for the organization. It's a big pleasure being here. So as you know, FARI is about AI data, and robotics. In my case, it's more about data. And so we'll have 4 presentations as usual. Now you know the pattern, and then we will have just panel discussion. So I propose just to start introducing the first speaker. The name is Dan Bloembergen, CTO of the AI innovation team of Amsterdam. He's a researcher in artificial intelligence working for the city of Amsterdam. His current work investigates the use of 3D point cloud data to localize street-level assets such as street light, trees, and traffic sign in order to generate up-to-date topographical maps. And he will say something about that and something more because I've seen that as sneaked in the presentation, they are quite interesting, so be here with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here for such a diverse group of people. So yeah, I'm working for the city of Amsterdam as an AI researcher. And the nice thing about this conference so far is that I've heard a lot of interesting things, but also a lot of things that I can relate to from my daily work for the city of Amsterdam. So I hope that I can touch upon some of these points that have already been discussed. My background is in academic research, actually, and I decided 1.5 years ago I would like to do something that has more direct, positive impact on the world. So not just do AI in a dark scientific tower, as they sometimes say, but do AI for good. So this conference here matches perfectly. Yeah, Amsterdam has already been mentioned a few times actually yesterday. I was quite happily surprised to hear that we are mentioned on the good side of things, things that are going well. I'm happy to hear that. So our previous city council actually put a lot of effort in developing an AI agenda for the city, really focusing on how can we use AI for the people, make technology work for the people and not just use AI just for the sake of AI, how to stimulate the AI ecosystem in Amsterdam, but also protect the digital rights of the citizens and make sure that everybody is represented. And something important as well is transparency. So we want to make sure that data is available, that people can see what's happening, what's going on. So I'll talk a little bit about those things. First, I want to give you a couple of examples of projects in which we use AI for the city. I'll be a bit biased in the sense that I'll talk mostly about work that I've been directly or indirectly involved in. But as you can imagine, the municipality of Amsterdam is a big organization. We have 18,000 civil servants, of whom 1,500 work in digitalization, innovation, and information. It's also a very decentralized organization. So there are many AI projects in the city that I'm also not aware of. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. Don't take it as to be fully covering everything that we do. So I represent here the AI team of the R&D department of the city of Amsterdam, and we mainly work on urban AI projects. So we want to be, we want to really do things that make a positive effect on the lives of citizens. I'll talk a bit about the last 2 projects that you see here. So work that we do with 3D point clouds in the city to make more sense of the public space. And the Amsterdam for All project, which is really focused on how can we make Amsterdam a more inclusive city for everybody, not just physically, but also digitally. So these 3D point clouds might be new for some of you, might be known for others, especially people who were in the robotics side of things earlier today. So basically point clouds are a nice way to get a 3D view of what's going on in the city, and they really present some advantages over traditional image-based approaches, because in a point cloud you actually can measure things. So you can see how far are objects located from each other. If the data is aligned with GPS, you can exactly know where things are located. And basically we can use this to make a more accurate map of the public space in the city. And for example, extract assets and their properties, which can be very useful. But for that, we need to make sense of this data. So this is something that in the AI we call semantic segmentation, might be familiar also to some of you. So we want to segment this data into things that have semantic labels. So which part of the data are representing a tree or a house, or in this case, you see in yellow here also street lights. And for this, we use deep learning algorithms that can help us make sense of this data. And we also use data fusion with already existing sources. We have lots of topographical maps that can help us to figure out what is where in this data. Once we have that, we can do some interesting things. So for example, on the top here, you see going from figuring out where are streetlights located in this point cloud to actually measuring them and saying something about our current state. So on the top right, for example, you see a little extract. Our algorithm located some street lights in the city, but not just their location. It could also say something about their height, but also their angle. And this angle is important. Like if a street light starts to be non-straight up, this might be an indicator that some maintenance is required. So having this kind of data helps, for example, the department that maintains the public lights in the city. It can help them to more accurately do maintenance. It also helps them to have a better idea of, are the street lights where they're supposed to be, and are there maybe patches of the city that can be improved still. In a similar way, we can use this data, for example, to monitor tree health, or what we're currently looking into, measuring the volume of the leaf crowns of trees, which again is important for the city to make policies that deal with climate adaptation, for example. If you have a lack of tree volume in certain parts of the city, this might cause heat islands. On the other hand, if you have too many trees in a city like Amsterdam, this can also make too much clutter in the ground below the city, where we also need to have cables and pipes, etc. So it's always interesting to find a balance in these kind of things. Interesting here is that, again, like I said, we don't just want to do AI for the sake of AI. So we always start with a question that comes from the business side of the city, one of the many departments that we have. They have an issue and they come to us or to the larger R&D department with a question, can you help us? And then we sit together and we're like, can we use AI for this, yes or no? And no is also a perfectly acceptable answer. So sometimes we don't do a project because we're like, AI is not really contributing anything, even though we could do something cool, probably from a theoretical or research-based perspective. Maybe for the end user, it's not so useful. So we really try to pick up projects that have value both for the business side of the city, but also, for us, really provide an opportunity to show what AI can do. A second thing that we can do with this point cloud data is here at the bottom. This ties into the Amsterdam for All project. So one thing that we want to investigate is the city accessible physically to everybody in the city, to our citizens. And this includes people with reduced mobility, for example, wheelchair users. And we have a few workshops actually with stakeholders. So there were people with reduced mobility or people with reduced sight. For example, they participated, citizens of the city of Amsterdam, and also some public citizens organizations that joined us in this discussion. And basically we try to map what are the issues that people encounter when they try to move around in the city. And then we figured out, okay, which of these can we actually pick up and maybe help to get a better understanding of them using AI technology. And one of them was the width of sidewalks. So the city knows where their public sidewalks are and how big they are, but what we don't always know is how many obstacles there are that clutter the public space. So again, in these 3D point cloud scans, we can actually see which objects are located above sidewalks. So here, these are the blue marked clusters of points in the leftmost image at the bottom. Once we have figured out where these obstacles are, we can actually extract their size, their shape, and then compute how much width of the sidewalk is actually left to freely pass. So this we call the residual sidewalk width or obstacle-free width. And then we can actually, using this data, make a map of the city that can, again, first of all, help policymakers to understand which areas of the city might be more problematic. We can also look into what could be possible solutions. Are there certain obstacles that we can easily remove or locate elsewhere, like bicycle racks, for example, or are there places where maybe the sidewalk just needs to be widened? It can also eventually be used, that is our hope at least, by the citizens themselves. So we hope to publish this as a map where people can actually go themselves and, this is very much future work, but hopefully use this as a personalized mapping tool where you can say, okay, I want to go from A to B, but I want to have a sidewalk width that is at least 1.5 meters, for example. And then this kind of data can really help to have a personalized map. We also do things that are not so much related to computer vision or 3D vision. So for example, we're also looking into how can we use AI to analyze the language level of the text that we use at the website of the city, but also in the policy documents. So one thing that we would like to have as a city is, a certain maximum level of language understanding that is needed to understand all the public documents, so that, as many citizens as possible are able to read what we put out there. And AI is also an interesting tool to use to analyze all our text and say, okay, which are the areas that still need improvement. We have many other projects. I could mention, hundreds, like I already said. We have also intern students who come from the universities in Amsterdam who want to do their master science research. They've worked with us on topics of, data science for mobility issues, predicting parking occupancy, forecasting the amount of people at different locations in the city at different times, etc. And using computer vision for all sorts of things. For example, we can use computer vision to detect garbage that is lying around on the street and should be collected. And if we do this with computer vision, ideally we get a more objective view of where problems are. If we would only rely on reports from citizens, then you might get overrepresentation of reports in certain areas, underrepresentation in other areas, which leads to an unfair distribution of resources. So basically, everything we do is we're trying to use, state-of-the-art AI research today to increase the livability of the city of tomorrow. And we already called this, we want to do AI for good. So yeah, AI for the common good is maybe even a better term here, which I think we can also adopt. So how do we ensure that this is also fair, transparent, ethical, inclusive, etc.? First of all, very similar to what was just talked about in Montreal, they had the declaration of the responsible use of AI. In Amsterdam, we have what we call the TADA Manifesto, which was also, it was written by professionals in the AI industry in the Amsterdam area. And this manifesto is also used, to promote and advocate an ethical and responsible use of data. So the city is also a signatory on this manifesto. And well, you can see it includes all the bullet points that have already been discussed here many times, so I don't have to mention them. Just as a side note, I heard in Montreal they had 2,000 citizens and about 200 companies that signed up on this. We have about half, but we also have about half of the citizens of Montreal. So I think that's a nice, indicator that it's nice to see that different cities are approaching things in a similar way and with good results. Something that was also already mentioned yesterday is Amsterdam and Helsinki were the first cities to propose an algorithm register, like a public registry of all the algorithms that we use in the city on data sources that relate to the city. And this is also to promote transparency about the use of these kind of sources. And it helps citizens to get a better idea of what type of data do we collect, how do we process it, what kind of oversight is in place, what kind of risk management, what kind of anti-discriminatory measures do we take, etc. So this algorithm register is still, very much work in progress. It was estimated that we have around 100 algorithms working in the city, deployed in the city. At the moment, we only have a small number of them on this website, but the hope is that in the coming years, we'll increase this number and hopefully in the end have a full list of algorithms on there. And finally, something else I wanted to highlight that came out recently. It was developed by a couple of data scientist colleagues and actually came out of an internship project also of a master's student, is the Fairness Handbook. So this handbook provides a practical set of instruments for assessing the fairness of a model, which can be a machine learning model, an AI model, or statistical model. And also how to minimize the algorithmic harms that may affect citizens. So I think this handbook is very interesting, and it might be interesting for many of you as well. It's in English, it's publicly available, so please have a look, and the authors are there also to contact if you have questions or suggestions, of course. We work with many partners in Amsterdam, not just universities, but also other knowledge institutes, NGOs, and public, citizen organizations. We also try to share knowledge with other municipalities in the Netherlands. Of course, Amsterdam being the biggest municipality, we have slightly more resources, but we really hope that, the work that we do in Amsterdam, by making it publicly available, on GitHub, by sharing data as much as we can, we hope that other municipalities can also pick up on these things without having to do all the groundwork and without having to reinvent the wheel over and over again. I think that's also a message that has come up here already a few times. That was it from my side. I hope this was interesting, gave a little bit of an insight in what we do in Amsterdam, and I'm happy to discuss it afterwards. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dan. Very interesting. We'll have time afterward for discussing a little bit more in detail. So now I'm pleased to introduce you a very good example of this kind of conference, which is extremely international, interdisciplinary. And Ariel is a good example of that. She's an architect. She has a background in architecture, urban planning policies. She's 21 climate ambassador at the Global Youth Climate Network of the World Bank Group and the co-founder at Urban Analytica, a collaborative platform of sustainable urban innovation. This will be mainly the topic today. So thank you, Ariella, for being with us, and get the floor.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit about this initiative, the Safe and Healthy Cities for Women initiative, with all of you. I just need a quick help to pass the, okay, so I would like to begin explaining a little bit of the context, who we are and where we come from. Well, my background is in architecture and in urban planning, and in the next slides, I'm going to explain, to briefly introduce the organization behind this project. I would like to begin showing this picture just because I like to torture myself that I cannot be there right now. This is a picture of Costa Rica, my home country. And for those of you who may know a little bit about my country, it's internationally known for being a sustainability referent. It has a really strong trajectory in environmental policy making and biodiversity conservation. It is indeed a really small country. It's about 5 million inhabitant population, located in the heart of the Central American region. There are many things that I could talk about from my country. However, I would like to concentrate in a particular one, and it's the contradiction that it faces within its environmental agenda. Because as I mentioned, it's known for being a sustainability referent. However, it faces a strong contradiction when it comes to this contradiction between the natural environment and the built environment. As I mentioned, it is a country that it's a pioneer, for instance, in the preservation of natural resources, but it faces critical issues within the built environment agenda, like poor urban and mobility infrastructure, high carbon emissions coming from the transport sector. When we take a closer look at indicators from this both agendas, there we can see this paradox. The most obvious one, or the most ironic one, is that we have a 100% renewable energy matrix, but on the other hand, more than 50% of the country's carbon emissions are produced by the transport sector. So this is, for me, it has always been like a question that has both tortured and at the same time motivated me to understand why we had this contradiction, and also because for me it was really important to understand, like, can a country really be considered a sustainability referent, even though this progress is only concentrated in the natural environment and not in the built environment? The answer for me is no, not precisely, and this is one of the reasons why that motivated me to study architecture and then specialize in urban planning. And it also motivated me to co-found an organization named Urban Analytica at the end of 2019, alongside another colleague and dear friend also from Costa Rica. This began as an experiment, a result of our graduation projects from the Masters in Urban Planning that we did in Milan. And basically, our main goal was to develop a collaborative platform of urban innovation. And what I mean with that is that we really were looking forward to establish this interdisciplinary and collaborative network of people, because we understood that the projects that we wanted to carry out were very complex, and we couldn't really give proper and accurate proposals only from the urban planning field. We needed other disciplines. And this is how we managed to develop a collaboration network of professionals coming from different sectors, such as renewable energies, transport and mobility, and of course, artificial intelligence. And of course, with the support of organizations and other international networks that have supported our work so far. We have been working in different challenges, but the most important one is the one that I'm presenting today, the Safe and Healthy Cities for Women. It's the organization's core project. And the reason behind that is because, well, it deals with gender inequalities in public spaces. And as I just mentioned, this organization was co-founded by 2 women, both from Latin America. And unfortunately, this is a really personal topic. And it's also, unfortunately, an increasing topic that it's getting worse each time. Gender violence in cities, specifically in public spaces, is becoming an increasing public health issue throughout the Latin American region. And even though the root cause may lie in socioeconomic dynamics, it's proven that the lack of proper urban infrastructure, policies, urban design really worsens this situation. This is just a fact that can begin to illustrate this issue. In 2019, finally, in my country, a law for street sexual harassment was passed. So it was the first year that women could actually file complaints in this matter. And surprisingly, by the end of the year, almost 70% of these complaints were filed by women. So of course, we just began to prove what we already have been observing throughout decades. So when we began to think about solutions is when we came with the idea of creating this initiative, the Safe and Healthy Cities for Women, because it's not only concentrated in the part of safety, also in mobility and health, but right now I'm explaining the line of action that has to deal mainly with safety. And this is how we came with this idea to develop a tool, a public space assessment tool, initially to be tested in Costa Rica, but our goal is to test this tool in other urban contexts that hopefully have more open data. That's something that I'm going to explain in a couple of slides. Of course, we had to develop partnerships for this project. I would like to highlight the Urban AI platform that has helped us a lot with resources and training to develop this tool. And also the team, Salgo Strong Algorithms, that they work with scientific intelligence for urban solutions. So this team, well, as I mentioned, this project is being developed by my organization in collaboration with the Salgo team. This Strong Algorithms team is a Spanish technology-based startup that is sponsored by the Higher Council of Scientific Research, and they have been developing this important part of the project. As a general description, as I just mentioned, there is a growing concern about the poor conditions of insecurity and gender violence in women in public spaces. So the main aim of this tool is to tackle this issue to a platform of participatory mapping from a gender lens, of course. The goal is that women and girls can both rate these public spaces, but also find real-time information about the state of these spaces so that they can take better decisions when navigating the public space, basically. The goal was to overlap this public space rating with data gender-based violence in public areas. Because for us, it was really important to understand where these problems are taking place and how they're affecting the quality of life of women. And here I would like to just highlight, because often in the urban planning architectural field, it's really hard to provide accurate proposals when we don't know exactly where the issues are taking place. So this was an important target of this project. As I just mentioned previously, we decided to locate this test pilot project in San Jose, which is the capital city of Costa Rica. And the main goals were to identify the social and geographical characteristics that are impacting the number of gender-based aggressions in public spaces in order to develop a multidimensional safety score. And of course, the main driver for this proposal is to provide tangible solutions, not only for public authorities, but also for citizens. The team, the Salgo Strong Algorithms team, began with this phase of data collection and homogenization, collecting geoinformation to later connect it with information that was extracted from census, criminal reports, social development indexes, for example. And the information was coming from different sources. So they developed automatic codes to homogenize this information. That was quite a challenge for the team. And then the next step was the algorithm creation and also the correlations phase. From this phase, a unique database with consistent information resulted about the different geographical areas to study these correlations and understand the trends behind this dynamic. And also to understand the interdependence of this information with the number of crimes, of course, through AI-powered algorithms. This is just an image to illustrate a little bit of the process that shows the correlation of variables in San Jose, socioeconomic data, crime report, census data, and also the correlation between different types of crimes, a part of the work that the team has been developing. So regarding the next steps, because probably this is the most important part, because we're still in the process of developing this tool, is that this collaboration between Urbanalytica as an urban innovation organization and the Strong Algorithms team aims to continue to dig deeper into exploring public data to understand these hidden aspects of gender-based violence in cities. Where are they taking place and why? Our preliminary test, very important in Costa Rica, suggested that we have several limitations, such as the lack of reliable public and open data. And this is really important to mention because this is one of the reasons why we're looking forward to apply and to begin to test this, this tool in other urban contexts. Because unfortunately in Costa Rica, we have been dealing with a lot of problems to access open data. This tool is aimed for helping local governments collect and homogenize data, not only to keep track of the problem, but also to develop efficient strategies to tackle the problem of gender-based violence in public spaces. One thing that I wanted to highlight, one final thing, is that for me this experience has been quite a journey. Being able to work with, to make this combination of an urban planning team with a team that works with artificial intelligence, I really believe that it's a great way of providing more accurate, consistent, and of course innovative solutions in the urban planning field. So, thank you.
So thank you, Ariela. So now I'm pleased to introduce Steven. The funny thing that some months ago we were together in a panel during the week organized by Nathanael, who was here before. But it was a completely different topic, so it was funny. So I was wondering, either we are doing too many things Or we are too kind to accept all sorts of invitations, so I don't have yet the answer. I will let you think about that. But it's a big pleasure to introduce Steven, who is a colleague, professor, University of Antwerp, director of the Research Center IMEC, Belgium, also leading ID Lab Antwerp Research Group, which is performing applied fundamental research in the area of communication networks and distributed intelligence. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Very good question indeed. I'm wondering the same thing. So indeed, so my name is Steven Lattre. I'm gonna present to you today a project or a program called City of Things. This is a large-scale project that we already are running for more than 7 years in Belgium. We started off in the city of Antwerp, but we scaled it up in the last few years as well to larger regions as well. So we are doing initiatives across Flanders. And as said, this is a program that we're already doing for more than 7 years. This was actually the very first sensor we bought in this. Some of you might still remember this. This was called an iBeacon 7-8 years ago. A lot of people were very, very enthusiastic about what these things could do. I don't think we really see them anymore. And that City of Things program is not a single sensor anymore. Now it looks like this. This is an example of our digital twin. A digital twin of the city of Antwerp. What is it? It's not just a simple 3D render of the city of Antwerp. That would be too easy. It's a common platform where we integrate a lot of our experiments, a lot of our prototypes that we're doing within the city of Antwerp, all in one single digital representation of what the city of Antwerp is. And so what you see in that sense is that we have been connecting a lot of different sensors, more than 200, 300, 400 sensors already at the city of Antwerp, on water, on air, on noise, and I'll talk about a bit more about them in detail. And with this digital twin, you actually have a very fine-grained view of what's happening both real-time and historically in the city of Antwerp. So you can look at how the traffic intensity is evolving over the city. You can look at how air quality is evolving, and you can actually even play with it. So you might decide that in that digital twin, you change something. You, for example, change a specific block of roads, and then you can immediately see how the impact will evolve of traffic because you're blocking the roads in all of this. So this is, for us, a very important platform for a number of reasons. It brings together a lot of aspects, but it also allows us to really play with how a city would look like. But so what is a smart city? There are a lot of different definitions of what a smart city could be. You could have something clean slate. A lot of cities in Asia are sometimes building an entirely new city from scratch. You have cities which are filled with technology. We adhere to a definition that consists of 3 main pillars. And so the first pillar is that a smart city should be goal-oriented. So it should really start from the very specific problems that a city is being confronted with. The second one is that technology is an enabler and not the solution. I heard previous speakers say, okay, we're not only focusing on AI solutions. Well, for us, a smart city is not only focusing on technology solutions either. And it definitely requires an active participation of every stakeholder, not in the least of citizens in this as well. So a little bit of information of what we have done across the board already. For the 7 years, we've been developing projects and prototypes of smart city experiments across all domains. So across water, air, mobility, climate, traffic, and security services such as aid as well. And today I'll give you a few examples of these projects that we've been doing in the last few years. And I'll also later on touch upon some of the issues that we see with respect to data and AI. So one important project we have is a project on flooding prediction. So we installed several sensors in the sewers to detect the water level in the sewers, all with the goal to see which type of regions, which type of streets actually have an abnormal high level of water level. We use that with open environmental data to predict when a specific local storm could actually hit a region in the city of Antwerp, and then also predict if that will give you an additional risk of flooding, 1 or 2 streets. And that allows us to actually already proactively drain the sewers to be able to solve this issue. Second example is related to water quality. We're actually, so this is a cross Flanders initiative, so not only city of Antwerp. We're busy installing right now the most fine-grained measurement site on water quality. We have about 2,500 sensors that we're deploying across Flanders to really give a real-time view of how water quality is evolving in Flanders. This is going to be the most dense measurement site for water quality across the world. And a third one, and a very special one in that sense, is the Mobility Data project. What is this project about? Obviously about mobility. We're developing new connected intelligent traffic systems for this. And there are a lot of use cases for this. So the idea is that you connect both sensors and make use of the information from different mobile devices to improve how we are all moving towards through the city. So there are a lot of use cases for this. It could be that one of the use cases is in developing intelligent traffic lights that, based on input from all of us, a mobile app that we have on our phone, allows the traffic lights to more optimally control themselves. But it could also be a use case where an emergency vehicle gets a green light everywhere, and the crossroads are already proactively being cleared, because we know in 200 meters that that emergency vehicle is going to pass. So the Mobility Data project is actually a specific one, and that's definitely why I wanted to highlight it. All the previous projects were projects where we developed an initial prototype for all of this. So it was a proof of concept, and we didn't really go further than this. With Mobility Data, we're taking a different approach to be able to scale this up. So as IMEC, we're not developing the technology per se anymore. We would do single, very initial experiments if we feel the need to do so, because we don't have enough confirmation yet of what is the right direction. But the moment we know that, we actually write a specification so that companies are able to subscribe to that and can really do the actual deployment. So Mobility Data is a project that goes beyond the proof of concept phase. At this moment in time, the project has been granted to a wide variety of companies, all based on this. And the final one is on how we can improve logistics to do this. And this is a project we're doing together with the Flemish Institute of Logistics, where we're trying to optimize the way that vans, boats float throughout Flanders in the same way as the internet is actually doing routing. So it's called the physical internet. You're basically transferring packets from one way to the other, but but you're not transferring packets, but you're transferring actual objects, vans. So all of these are just a glimpse of the projects that we're doing, and as you can already see throughout my presentation, all of them really have data and AI challenges. And I would like to take the last 5 minutes of my talk to explain what data and AI challenges are that we're focusing, or that we're actually experiencing. One of the biggest issues we have is data as isolation. It's very easy to develop an initial prototype and deploy a number of sensors and then use something with it. But in reality, what you see is that you often end up with isolated data silos. Every city will have a number of databases altogether, which are often not connected. Everybody knows that the value is in connecting them, but it's very hard to do so. So we're very much focusing on building what we call data spaces. These are interoperable data platforms, allowing different stakeholders from users to organizations to companies to really share data with each other in a secure and interoperable way. And we're doing this across the board in the sense that it's not just organizations, we're also doing this from a citizen perspective. So one of the important research initiatives we have at IMEC as well, a bit outside of the smart city sphere, but also very much important for the smart city sphere, is called Solid. So Solid is a personalized data pot that you as a citizen would have, which actually contains all your personal data. And it allows you to be in control of the data that you share to other organizations, to other companies. So it's a key in making sure that we can actually share data with who we want and also close that data off if we want to change this again. And on top of that, you need machine learning. So if you really are able to share data with different databases, on top of that, you will need to do machine learning and AI as well. But also there, it's important to focus a lot on building new machine learning techniques that are doing this from a privacy-aware perspective as well. So a lot of our solutions that we're developing are also technological solutions that allow you to build AI models which link to that privacy preservation. And then it all comes together in this type of slide. If you really want to build that open local digital twin, that first 3D video I showed, you need to have some kind of smart data platform that connects all of this together. But connecting all of that together actually means that you need to distribute that across all the different stakeholders that you have. So you will need to build data spaces for different environments, a data space for health, a data space for mobility, a data space for sustainability, and so on. So it's really building that ecosystem that we're focusing on very much. Good. Switching gears a little bit on also still AI. Another thing that we're confronted with and that we do not have the challenge for, the solution for yet is we're talking a lot about AI, and I think it's clear that in smart cities, AI and sensors are going to be key. I think that's really the difference that we're seeing 7 years ago from now. 7 years ago, we were talking about how can we easily install and connect a sensor to a public infrastructure, and we were really spending a lot of time and frustration on doing that. Right now, this is, I wouldn't say solved, but it's really, really easy to do all of this. So the biggest attention that we have right now is how can we make sure that we can do some kind of AI and preferably on the sensor as much as possible. But that actually is generating a whole new research challenge for us that we're slowly tackling right now, and it has to do with the state of AI right now. So if you look at how AI has been evolving over the last few years, there are a lot of initiatives popping up in the last few years. Why? Because the popularity of AI is, of course, really huge. And for people who are in the field, obviously know that AI has been a story of ups and downs from time to time. More or less, if you look at until 2010, until really deep learning kicked in, you see that AI went a bit up and down, but it was more or less a linear progression. You also see that in the computational complexity of these systems. It means that actually every 2 years, the computational complexity of these AI systems increased with a factor 2. Since 2010, we have deep learning and we have new types of popular technologies that are popping up with a huge impact. If you look at the computational complexity of these AI systems, they're really exploding right now. It's actually, there's a 100 increase of these neural networks and how big they are becoming every 2 years. And that's great because it gives us a huge amount of progress, but it's also really an issue if you're looking at it from a smart city perspective. And that's what's causing us a lot of headaches. It's an issue because it's, from an energy perspective, really a huge issue. So I'll give you a very simple example to just tangibly feel how this is an issue. If you ask Siri to, for example, turn off the light, what actually happens behind the scenes is a huge number of AI systems that are kicking in. There's an AI system on your device, then it's actually being transferred over the internet to a data center where another neural network is kicking in, and it's being sent again to your phone, and then the light is being shut off. All of this actually uses much more energy than you would need to turn on that light for 1 hour. So if you're thinking of saving energy by, say, asking Siri to turn off the light, you're actually losing energy. And the same holds for smart cities as well. As said, this is not something where we have a solution for, but it's definitely something that we're very much working on right now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steven. Quite impressive. It's quite clear we have to learn a lot from Flanders. Let's see what we should learn from Wallonie as well. So I invited the next two speakers, Isabelle Rawart and Michel Herquet. Isabelle is Smart Territory Advisor for the Digital Strategy for Wallonia, with a particular focus on e-health, e-mobility, tourism, smart cities. And Michel is one of the managing partners of B12, is mainly in charge of strategy business development with particular interest for advanced predictive analytics. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. So in Wallonia, we have Digital Wallonia. What is it? It's a name of our digital strategy for the region and the name of our platform, of course. So among the various programs coordinated by the Walloon Digital Agency, there are two programs for local entities. First of all, Digital Wallonia Smart Region program enables a critical size of use cases and an impact on the socio-economic development of urban ecosystems. It avoids dispersal smart local initiatives through the promotion of openness and interoperability of the data and of the solutions. And we involve inside a collaborative governance a lot of our cities, even the smallest, because in Wallonia we have a lot of little and rural cities and municipalities. And it involves also expertises from various public actors, such as Smart City Institute, Futurocité, but also our universities and research centers. And all together, we build projects from bottom up. Just from the needs of our citizens. There are smart region calls for projects, and so far 35 projects have been achieved. Among these, there are several projects in smart mobility, smart energy, environment, smart local commerce and tourism, citizen involvement, and there are also platforms organizing our territorial data governance, open data, data sovereignty. So Wallonia wants a real integrated smart region approach where every city can benefit from the digital uses created by all private and public actors. And each of our funded projects can be replicated by the other cities. Then we have the second program for cities. It's been called Digital Wallonia for AI. It's not only for cities and public sector, it's also for companies, but I'll speak today only for the part of it about cities. And this program offers resources, support, and funding to companies, but also public sector and local and supra-local authorities in Wallonia to exploit data thanks to artificial intelligence in order to improve their services, tools, and processes, or to help decision making. So the two programs are working together to offer more fundings to our cities, municipalities, and supralocal entities to minimize their co-financing. Doesn't work? Yes. The support and funding is organized in 3 steps. First of all, the Start AI program is a continuous program which helps to do a complete diagnosis of the AI maturity thanks to a coaching mission. This is the opportunity to identify or confirm AI opportunities within a public administration, a city, a supralocal entity, and so on, to perform a data check. The mission is carried out by AI private sector experts from private companies or research centers. Around 25 cities or supralocal entities took part of our first Start AI public sector this year, with 10 lead projects. Several of these cities and AI experts are among us today. Some of the cities joined to bid one project in various teams, such as traffic management or documents management or detection of errors and problems in files. The second step is Trampoline AI. It's aimed at public and local actors wishing to develop a proof of concept in artificial intelligence. It works as calls for projects where the public actor submits its project in collaboration with a Belgian or European company providing AI services. The first Trampoline AI public sector will be launched this summer. It will notably allow to carry out the Start AI projects. The third and final step is Cape AI. Cape AI helps to have a mature solution with artificial intelligence, and it facilitates the go-to-market of the projects. Our second Smart Region call for projects will also be soon launched, and it will allow to have sustainable AI projects used in our territories, tested in our territories, and the other cities can see all these proof and concepts and pilots on it. The final call for projects will be also for digital twins. And let's now listen to one of our Start AI public sector's projects. Two of the Brabant Wallon province presented by its AI expert, Michel Herquet from the B12 consulting company.
Thank you, Isabelle. So, big responsibility. I think I'm probably the last content guide of the day and of the conference. So I just have to keep you awake for 5 more minutes. I hope that will be okay. So my name is Michel Herquet. I'm one of the managing partner of B12, which is a AI service company, so we are specializing in developing AI solutions for complex problems, both for companies in the private sectors, but also for the public sector. We have been working, for example, on mobility projects for the STIP, for the Brussels Public Transport. We have been working for some other Walloon agencies. But today I just would like to take 5 minutes to present you a project, to introduce you with a project we have been doing for the Province du Brabant Wallon. So for some of you who are not familiar with the Belgian institutional lasagna, the province level is somewhere between the region level, which is just below the federal level. So federal level, region level, province, and the commune and the cities. The province is just between the region and the commune. And the province of Brabant Wallon is a beautiful province, which is just somewhere south of Brussels with about 400,000 inhabitants. And one of the responsibilities of the province is to take care of the economical support, so to support the economical activities on its territory, and to provide support to the businesses and to the companies who have activities on their territories. Well, the provinces, they just need to know those companies very well. And it's actually difficult for governmental levels such as a province to have a good picture of what the companies who are active on its territories actually do in practice. So they have a lot of administrative information about those companies coming from different governmental databases, but they don't necessarily know exactly what those companies are doing. And more importantly, they don't necessarily know the links and the relations between those companies. So the goal of this project was really to try to see if we could build a prototype, if it could be the very simple solution to help them have a better understanding of what those companies are actually doing in practice, to better define the sector where those companies are active, and to see if we could also think about future solutions where the relationship between those companies could be made more explicit. So what we did is essentially a very simple proof of concept prototype. The idea was to build a small crawling bot that would go online and essentially crawl the company's website and try to fetch information about what the company is doing. And what we've been able to show is that with a relatively simplistic NLP approach, so simplistic approach using natural language processing techniques, using modern natural language techniques, we were able to actually find the right sector of activity, the same type of sector of activity as a human would define for that company after spending a little bit of time on the website, in about 70 to 80% of the cases, and that's probably something that can be definitively improved. So what we would like to do now, and that's what we are going to do in the next phase of this project, so we are just at the very, very early phase of the project, what we would like to do is to push a little bit further to better define the characteristic that we would like to extract from those public sources about the companies. But more important, we would like to extract, as I've said, the relationship between the companies. For example, relationship between clients and providers, between client and product suppliers, relationship between partners, companies, relationship between companies who are active in the same sectors or in the same areas, those kind of things. And we would like to put all those relationships in a database that would be naturally a graph database with relations between the different companies to make the job of the person in charge and the persons in charge of the economic development of the province easier by allowing them to make queries about, finding local ecosystems that obey certain query rules or that satisfy certain query rules, so that they can really better target their public action. So that's really the goal of this project, and I think the goal is, well, objectively in reach, and that's something that we'll be working on in the next few months. And I think it gives you a good example of what we can do in the context of this Startia, Tremplin IA, and CAPIA support program in Wallonia. Thanks.
All the panelists to join me on the stage, please.
Thank you.
We go to the question and answer session. So we'd like to thank again all the panelists for the presentation, first of all. Okay, so the topic of the session is data. And so I would like to have, first of all, your opinion about how today for your problems, for your task, is easy to access data. In particular, the role of open data. What do you think? Are open data available? Are the available data really useful? Just have respect to your personal experience, how did you solve this problem of finding data to do? Let's start in the nearest, from the nearest neighbor to, please. Try.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, in my case, the gathering data actually was one of the main challenges. We actually had to contact many different organizations and public institutions to have access to this data. And in many cases, we were not successful. So it really depends on the area. In my country, it's very complicated. And it's one of the reasons why we decided to scale the project in other areas where there's proper infrastructure and available data.
Why do you think it's difficult? It's more technical, more political issue? Or
Both cases, yes. So in the end, this really hinders the development of the project and also the motivation and the whole timeline process. So it's a tricky situation, definitely.
Okay, thank you. So,
yeah, I think it's in every country difficult for sure.
In a different manner.
So I think in general, we spend, if you look at it in data science, but I think everybody knows this, you spend the majority of it actually on the data transformation and getting the data before you can actually get into the actual data science. I think what makes it much more difficult, I think, in a smart city perspective is, at least in a lot of the cases that we do, is that you need an online type of deployment of it also. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to gather data once and then I'm going to start building an AI model and I have it. No, you really need to connect all these different databases on a structural level, and that provides a lot of additional headaches as well. So there's the headache, of course, of transforming all the data, which you would have in an offline fashion as well. But if you want to do this in an online fashion, it's doing this in a secure way, doing this in a way that if changes happen in one database, or because the structure changes, that it does not reflect on the other, that it happens in a standardized way. And it's a huge challenge. But I think we need it because that a lot of these cases, when we started out with City of Things, we were really these silos, and we were only able to provide really limited amounts of functionality. It was only when we really were able to combine this in this digital twin, combining mobility and traffic and air quality together, that you got real insights of, for example, how mobility was impacting air quality in the city center.
And in your case, there were open data, because when you start talking about dynamic data, it becomes very realistic to think that this data will be open to everyone every day. So this is indeed what you are anticipating my second question. Indeed, that since smart city is a very complex world, a very complex system, and only by streaming data in a real time, you can really follow, monitor it. Is it really realistic to think about data lakes as well, or solution where all those data are really accessible? Because I think technically speaking, it's quite challenging.
Well, technically speaking, it's absolutely a challenge. From a legislative point of view, it's probably even more challenging. Sure. But I think you need to set the goals, right? And I think there are a lot of European initiatives, for example, Gaia X, that is really focusing on this right now. So is it possible right now to just do this in a very large scale data lake? No, definitely not. But I'm optimistic as always. So I really hope that in the future that will be possible, because we also have the drive of the European Union who's focusing on this.
Thank you. Dan, please.
So for me, what I've noticed is it depends a lot on the type of data that you have. Of course, when it deals with privacy sensitive issues, you don't technically want public data on this, right? So I think what AI can help, I've seen some approaches to this recently, is that you can, for example, generate synthetic data that is based on the underlying distribution of privacy sensitive data. And then you can actually have a nice data set to play with and even to publish with your work without compromising.
This is for playing, but for real deploying applications.
For deploying this
what do you think?
Yeah, for deploying, for example, a thing from the city of Amsterdam is we have a lot of data that is useful, but often it's located in many different departments with many different people. So, for example, the project that we're doing now with trees in Amsterdam, there are data sets. I've by now found 4 different data sets in the municipality with different owners, with different levels of maintenance, quality, etc. So I think for many projects, there is a lot of data, but actually finding the one that is the best for your
How
case.
did you solve this problem of finding different data sets which were probably belonging to different owners, different institutions? How much is politics useful in solving this kind of issue? Is more technical or it's more
I think
issue?
part of it is that the city is just a very much decentralized organization, and many departments are not aware what is happening in other departments. And we're trying to solve this by having a more centralized data organization. But this is something that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. Yeah.
Please. I think you should switch on. Push.
I just want to give you 2 words I'll explain. First of one, education. And the second one will be projects. First of all, I always said there is no problems with technology. The problems is always about human resources. We need to educate people, first of all, in public sector and localities, because we see every employee of a public organization of a locality, every employee organize its data as he will. In each department, everybody has his own tables and files. So in Wallonia, the role of the public sector is to educate. It's very important. In our agency, we do a lot of sensibilization to improve maturity and so on, and to have a governance. First of all, smart city is smart governance and governance of people. The second one is there is something outside the political box. There are lives, there are people, and we have to begin from the bottom up, from real projects. So in Wallonia, we choose to begin from real needs, real projects, and then we see each other with all our partnerships, public and private, to think, what about data? Which data do we need? And as everybody around the table see that there is a win-win in such a project, they accept to share data, to open data. Because I don't think we have to talk data for data. It doesn't work. We won't improve it. We have to begin from projects and also to see artificial data only as a mean to concretize these projects, and this is only data and human brains to build algorithms. That's all.
Thank you.
I think a lot of things have been said, so I'm going to be very short. I think that overall, the question is not really about, is it difficult to find data? Honestly, most of the time it's not that difficult to find the data. But I think we should really understand, and most people should focus much more on data pipelines than on actual static data sets. Static data sets, you can find them everywhere, the key question is
what you find are valuable. You think that what you find everywhere is valuable for your task.
Yeah. But it's not. It's honestly. I mean, if you look close enough and if you talk to the right persons in the organization, you always end up finding something interesting. And there is a lot of open data. There is a lot of data online, and you can always, find proxies and things like that. But ultimately, the problem is that if you want to build useful solutions, you need strong data pipelines, which are running all the time so that the data you're actually using for your application is up to date. And that's a much more complex problem to solve than just finding one data set. Building those data pipelines should really be the core of our focus right now.
Thank you. Now let's see if there is any question in the public, please. Raise your hand if... Okay, yes.
Hello. Yes. So thank you first to all of you for the presentation. It was really inspiring to see how AI can be applied in different settings in different cities. My name is Antoine Verhulst. I'm working in that issue in mobility currently at BlaBlaCar. And I had a question for all of you, maybe more for Dan, is how do you decide the roadmap of your project? So typically in the private setting, I'm used to hear feedback from users and like qualitative feedback or quantitative feedback, and then from that we decide how we're going to solve the issue. In the public sector, how does it work? Do you hear from the user or for the public sector who decide a bit what you're going to work on and what is the agenda, basically?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this depends a lot on the type of project that we're dealing with. So with the Amsterdam for All project that I talked about, this was an idea that came from an organization that we work with. It's called World Enabled. They're like, okay, you should think about how you can make your city more accessible. And then the next step is, okay, who are the users that are impacted? Which are the citizens that are impacted? And then we start to talk to these stakeholders. And then over some iterations come up with what are the feasible projects that we can now start tackling. This is one roadmap that you can follow, right? But then if there's a problem from within the municipality, you're just talking to colleagues from a different department who say, can you guys help us? And there's a third type of project that we deal with because we are part of R&D. So we have also some freedom to just go out on a limb, so to say, and figure out, okay, what new technologies are there and what could we foresee in the coming 5 years to be relevant for potential problems in the city. And then once we've developed a kind of prototype, we try to match this to different departments that could, use this. So it depends a lot on the type of project. Hope that answers the question.
I can maybe add a little bit on that. So the way we approached it in Antwerp is actually we had a threefold approach. On the one hand side, we followed a very clear methodology within the city to really find what we call the wicked problem. So if you ask the different departments, you often find their number one issue that they are faced with, or where they think that citizens are faced with, and from there on you can find at least what a smart city solution could be. The second part is that we really also have an open call every 2 years, supported by the Flemish government, where every type of municipality, city, or just a simple village, often in a consortium, can actually come together and can also come up with a specific project. And often you get some very regional, very specific projects to that sense as well. And we have a third initiative, and that's called Hackable City of Things, where citizens can actually come up with a specific idea that they want to get tackled. So an example of that came out is that a group of citizens actually wanted a better way to detect noise pollution in the city, and we really developed that together with them and also for them based on an open citizen science call. So that's also something that was really relevant as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions in the audience? Nathanael had a question. One there, one here. Please.
My name is Antoine Bagula. I'm from the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. So being in academia, I know that there is very often a gap between research and deployment. And you guys there, I mean, you are already on something which is real. It's not just writing papers, that can be published. And you are touching real data. And the facilitator mentioned something. Is the data available? And you also mentioned that the data is scattered within department units, and sometimes this could be a difficulty. But we know on the research side that there is a solution for that. Deploying distributed machine learning, or what they call federated machine learning, could be solving this problem, because you have the problem of the data stay where it is, and you can deploy distributed machine learning to solve this problem. Is there any, my question is there any beginning of deploying this? Because you are responsible for doing real deployment. Are you deploying such kind of techniques already, or not yet? It's just kind of fiction. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to know a little bit more about the maturity of this kind of solutions and the acceptation also in the real city. Thank you for the question, by the way. Please.
So the answer is yes and no. So I think you, in the beginning of your question, you highlighted very nicely the gap that we're often faced with. There's research and there's large-scale deployment as well, and we have these two gears as well within the City of Things program, that we try out new things, but translating this to a large-scale deployment is often very, very hard as well, but necessary as well. So yes, in research, we're doing a lot on federated machine learning. We call it privacy-preserving machine learning, but it's the same thing. And we take a different angle to it in the sense that you do not build one single model, but every organization is able to, based on pooling data, is able to learn its own model. But we're doing that very much in very small projects. And I think the challenge is going to be how we scale this up in the future as well.
Yeah, I also like the first part of the question. I'm coming from an academic background, so I am aware of this gap moving from academia to a more practical context. And what I've noticed is that if you take an academic research paper, often this works very well with a specific data set that the authors have used to train their model. But then once you go to the real world and you add some noise and you have some real world irregularities in your data, the whole performance falls apart. So I think there's also some role still to play for academic researchers to move out of their data comfort zone, so to say. And also sometimes we already have nice partnerships where this is happening, but I think it can happen more in more different fields, where academic partnerships can also be created, where researchers take messy data sets to develop their models, because that will help bridge this gap, so to say.
Ariel, about the acceptation of your models by the society, by the city, do you have something, in your case, was specific application, which is not always easy probably to consider by the administration? What is your feeling about the impact of what you're doing on the real?
I think that this has evidenced, at least in my country, that we really need an infrastructure and a proper link between academia and organizations and public administration. So because we have been able to contact different actors within this process. And also what you mentioned was also really interesting regarding this application of academic research in real life problems, because actually we're bringing like the real problems and this messy information, and I believe that the AI team has been really implicated and happy to be able to get into this sort of problems.
Okay, I think we have the last question. Nathanael, you have the honor to ask the last question, I guess.
Eduardo, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So we had this morning with the Digital Minds at the federal level a meeting about data governance. So when we see the use of open data, it's really a pity. We have discussed about Gaia-X. It has been mentioned, but Gaia-X is a very theoretical approach. So a first question would be, do you, as for example, as responsible for Amsterdam, or in your practical exercise, use this framework in some way? But in the discussion, we convert towards a use case-based approach. So my question would be, what would be the data you would dream of? And for Amsterdam or the people or from Wallonia, how do you manage compliance, trust, when you have a new use case? What is the process in order to get the data, to have the data pipeline, and so forth? Yeah, there are many questions in one. So yeah, what about how data governance at the national level or European level can improve what you do concretely at the smart city level?
Yeah, I think frameworks already can help because it gives you sort of a guideline to work towards, right? If you have a certain set of criteria that okay, from a nation level or from an EU level, every project should follow, then it's kind of easy to check off the boxes and figure out, okay, the data that we're using or the way that we're using the data is sound. So I think in that sense this can help. I'm not sure if that was kind of what you were aiming at, but it's a very hard question to answer, I guess, because every project that we do is different and involves different types of data with different types of sensitivities and different types of intricacies. If we have data about trees, privacy concerns are not such a big thing. So I think, yeah, in that sense, this is all I can say in the general sense, so to say. Yeah.
Or let the Wallonian side of
Yes, there are a lot of waitings from local authorities on Digital Data Act from federal, because they also say that there are nothing about local authorities data in such directives from Europe or from the federal level. So there are a lot of things to create, and there is only restrictions such as the GDPR for the public sector and for the local authorities, but we also need other things that can improve the data governance. With the lack of it, we need to invent ourselves our own governance, and we choose to do it project by project. So we work a lot with the intermunicipalities and provinces. Every one of them choose a team, mobility or other one, and we choose to have a lot of rules of interoperability so that the others can replicate the same schema of data governance. But there are no other things to base on it, unfortunately. So I like to hear Mr. Ackerman, because there are things to do for local and public data.
Okay, so I think we are running out of time. So this is the end of the session. I would like to thank again all the panelists for their time, their availability. It's not yet the end, so I'm pleased to welcome, I don't know, we'll close this session, the day, both, okay, for important communication about FARI. This is not yet the end. Thanks. Bye.
Right. Good. Thank you, Gianluca, and the panelists. This is coming to an end. So both Carl and myself were obliged, of course, to say a few words in closing up. And I think when we started yesterday, I started to welcome by saying that this conference, as it is also the objective of FARI, was all about collaboration. I think a lot of the presentations have shown, I think, the importance of multidisciplinarity, collaboration, and I also like the fact that it was emphasized. It is necessary, but it is not so difficult. It's hard work, it's complex, but it's worth it. And I think that's the challenge that we're willing to take with FARI, and that's what we want to do for Brussels, for across the regions, Europe, and beyond, because we always have to say aim high. But first of all, the success of the conference, I think we heard already good feedback. But it's mainly thanks to you, first of all, being present here all together. Hope you were also able to do some networking like back in the old days. Hope that fruitful connections were made and collaborations can come out of it. But more specifically, thanks to the session leaders, our research leaders of FARI, the presenters that came from close by, but also from far away. Really enjoyed all the input there. A specific big thank to the technical team of Beaux-Arts. You guys did a great job. Also Isabelle, who coordinated everything. Big thanks, hands up for that. Of course, our partners, the Proximus ADA team, Omina, WBI, and Le Wagon. Shout out to them to support us and the event, and also looking forward for further collaboration. VBULB, and of course also Brussels administrations, specifically Innoveris and CRB.
And like Hans said, indeed, working as researchers or as research organizations for cities and regions is a humbling experience, I think, from all sides. And all the presentations showed to us some good ideas that we want to pick for ourselves and that we want to maybe push further with Brussels. And again, like Hans said, this would not have been possible without a few people, so it's not an award ceremony, but I will thank them rapidly. Jackie, the master planner, Laurence, also for the tireless work behind, Anna, Adnan, Yannick, Soksheng, Ina, Inda, Luc, Julien, Clyde, Elio, Kainat, Peter, all the different students who have helped us from ULB, VUB, and other places. So thanks to them. And also thanks to the Committee of Observers, Carmen, Geoffroy, Cédric, Sarah, Julien. So, and last and not least, thanks to you. And we hope to see you next year for another session. So thanks again. We hope you got some nice aspects from it, and see you next year.